These are toxic substances that are literally in your body right now. A single liter of bottled water contains approximately 240,000 tiny plastic particles. Let me repeat that. 240,000 pieces of plastic in every liter of bottled water you might be drinking. That's small enough to enter your cells, cross the blood-brain barrier, and lodge in your organs. An emerging litigation is finally holding the companies responsible and accountable for their actions. Welcome back to Ask Rusty Law, the podcast where we break down complex legal issues affecting everyday people. I'm your host, attorney Rusty Messer with Big River Trial Attorneys. Today, we are tackling two of the most alarming public health crises in our time. These are microplastics and PFAS contamination. These are not just environmental issues that you hear about on the news. These are toxic substances that are literally in your body right now. An emerging litigation is finally holding the companies responsible and accountable for their actions. If you've been diagnosed with certain cancers or certain serious illness, if you've consumed contaminated water, or if you've been exposed to these chemicals through your work, you need to understand your legal rights. So let's dive in. Let's talk about what are microplastics and why should you care, right? This should be a wake-up if you're not familiar with it. According to research funded by the National Institutes of Health and conducted at Columbia University, a single liter of bottled water contains approximately 240,000 tiny plastic particles. Let me repeat that. 240,000 pieces of plastic in every liter of bottled water you might be drinking. So microplastics are tiny plastic particles that measure 5 millimeters or smaller, so about the size of a sesame seed, are usually much smaller. And the smallest ones are called nanoplastics. These are less than 1 micrometer in size. That's small enough to enter your cells, cross the blood-brain barrier, and lodge in your organs. So where do these things even come from? Microplastics come from the breakdown of larger plastic items. So think about this. Plastic water bottles that break down over time, food packaging in containers, synthetic clothing. A single garment can shed nearly 2,000 microfibers in one wash. Tea bags made with plastic, chewing gum, baby bottles when heated, car tires wearing down on the roads, plastic cutting boards in your kitchen. This could be medical devices and IV bags. Every plastic product you've ever used is still around in some form, broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. And scientists believe that virtually all plastic ever made, except what's been incinerated, still exists somewhere in our environment. And here's the kicker. Microplastics are now everywhere. They have been found at the summit of Mount Everest, in the deepest parts of the ocean. They have been found in Antarctic ice. They have been found in the air that you breathe and throughout the food chain. So researchers estimate that people inhale about 68,000 microparticles every day, right? So these things are already in us. They have been detected in human blood, in lungs, in the liver, in the kidney. They've been detected in the placenta. They've been found in breast milk, even in the brain. And the health effects of this can be very serious. So let me tell you why this matters from a legal standpoint. We are seeing mounting scientific evidence linking microplastics to serious health problems. So we're talking about cardiovascular disease. There was a landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine in March of 2024 that found patients who had surgery to remove plaque from their arteries, and those who had microplastics in their arterial plaque more than twice as likely to suffer heart attacks, strokes, or death. Right? So researchers at Stanford are now conducting follow-up studies showing these particles get inside cells and cause major changes in the way our genes express. Brain health. A 2025 study using real-time imaging on mice showed microplastics moving through their brains and actually blocking blood vessels, right? This potentially leads to strokes. Another recent study found higher concentrations of microplastics in the brains of deceased patients who have been diagnosed with dementia compared to those without dementia. So the average person may have roughly a spoonful of microplastics in their brain alone, right? These things can affect reproductive health. Studies show links to reduced sperm count, reduced sperm quality, and complications with pregnancy. It can affect pediatric health. Children are particularly vulnerable. Researchers at Stanford examined tonsils removed from healthy children and found microplastics not just on the surface, but embedded deep within the tissue. In one child's tonsils, they found visible specks of Teflon under a microscope. And children are at higher risk because of their frequent hand-to-mouth behaviors, right? They have a higher breathing rate relative to their body size, and they are still developing the biological barriers to prevent these plastics from moving in. So some of the other health effects that we're seeing or research suggests links to inflammatory conditions throughout the body, immune system dysfunction, hormone disruption, metabolic disorders, oxidative stress, DNA damage to cells, potential increase in cancer risk. This list goes on and on. It includes colorectal cancer. It includes lung cancer. And look, I have to be pretty transparent here that the FDA currently states that the scientific evidence doesn't demonstrate that microplastics in food pose a risk to human health. And more research is needed, but here is what we do know. These particles are accumulating in human tissue. Animal and cell studies show very concerning findings, and the science is evolving rapidly. Some experts believe we are in the lull before a storm in the midst of a plastic health crisis that we're only beginning to understand. Now let's talk about PFAS. So PFAS, this stands for polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are a group of over 5,000 different man-made chemicals that have been manufactured since the 1940s. They're also known as forever chemicals because they don't break down in the environment. They stay around indefinitely. PFAS have been used in non-stick cookware like Teflon, Scotchgard fabric protector, Stainmaster carpets, firefighting foam. They are used all the time in food packaging. PFAS are used in water-resistant clothing, in cosmetics that people put in their face, and thousands of other products that are very likely in your home. Now, here's what makes the PFAS cases so particularly egregious from a legal standpoint. Companies like 3M and DuPont have known for over 50 years that these chemicals were dangerous. Internal documents show that as early as 1999, 3M's own scientists were warning that PFAS were spreading throughout the environment, bioaccumulating in the food chain. But they kept selling these products. They kept telling us they were safe. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, at least 45% of the nation's tap water is estimated to have one or more types of PFAS in it. This is the water coming out of your faucet. According to the EPA, there's more than 158 million Americans who are drinking water contaminated with PFAS. And PFAS are in the blood of virtually every person in the United States. Now, unlike microplastics, where the science is still developing, the health connections for PFAS are much more well established. So exposure to PFAS has scientifically been linked to several types of cancers: kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid cancer, liver cancer. And these PFAS have been linked to other serious health conditions, like thyroid diseases, like hyperthyroidism, and what's known as Hashimoto's disease. PFAS have been linked to ulcerative colitis, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, and a reduced immune response. PFAS have been found to cause pregnancy complications, including preeclampsia. They've been linked to developmental issues in children, reproductive problems, including infertility. So these aren't speculative risks. These are established connections that courts across the country are recognizing in litigation right now. Now, there's a big difference between the microplastics and the PFAS, and that's how far the cases are developed. So let's talk what's happening in the courts. The litigation surrounding microplastics and PFAS are both exploding, but they're at different stages of the development. Microplastic litigation is still emerging, but it's accelerating rapidly, right? So firms who track this litigation say that microplastic cases have strong parallels to the PFA litigation, which is much more well developed. And according to a new wave brought under toxic tort theories, it seems that it's both likely and imminent that the microplastic cases are just going to keep ramping up. So right now, microplastic cases fall into a few different categories. One of the big categories is consumer fraud and greenwashing. So these are the lawsuits claiming that companies falsely marketed products while hiding the microplastic risks. So we're talking about bottled water companies who told us their water was safe to drink. Multiple class actions have been filed against bottled water manufacturers for marketing water as natural, while bottles contain dangerous levels of microplastics. Just like that, we have baby bottle manufacturers. In June of 2024, there was a class action suit filed against Phillips and Handicraft for labeling baby bottles as BPA free, but failing to warn that these bottles actually leach microplastics when they're heated. So parents thought they were protecting their children buying this BPA free bottle, but they were unknowingly exposing them to harm that the companies knew about. Ziploc bags. In May of 2025, there was a class action filed against SC Johnson alleging Ziploc products were deceptively marketed as either microwave safe or for freezer use without warning that microplastics leach out of these when they're heated or frozen. Baby wipes. In June of 2025, Water Wipes USA was sued for falsely marketing baby wipes as plastic-free and pure, but they've been alleged to contain microplastics. So another theory against these companies are a public nuisance or environmental cases. So here we are seeing state attorney generals and cities going after major corporations. One example is California versus ExxonMobil. In September of 2024, the California Attorney General filed a major lawsuit against Exxon, alleging that the company engaged in a decades-long deception campaign about recycling that caused and exacerbated the global plastics pollution crisis, right? Telling people that these plastics were recyclable when in really they're not, right? So it's alleged that Exxon needs to establish an abatement fund, and California is seeking injunctive relief to stop these false claims about, recycling and circular plastics. New York sued PepsiCo over plastic pollution in the Buffalo River, claiming that the company's packaging created a public nuisance. Baltimore, the city sued the beverage companies, several beverage companies like PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Frito-Lay, for their roles in creating a plastic pollution crisis. And Baltimore is seeking compensatory damages and equitable relief and punitive or punishment damages. So Los Angeles sued PepsiCo and Coca-Cola in October of 2024, alleging that these companies, as the top plastic polluters in the world, failed to disclose health and environmental harms and misled consumers by labeling their products as recyclable. So we are seeing some challenges in the early cases, and I have to be honest with you, many of the early microplastic cases have faced some significant hurdles. Some of the cases have been dismissed because the plaintiffs couldn't prove that the specific product actually contained harmful levels of plastic, that the microplastics from that specific product caused their harm, or that consumers were actually deceived by the labeling. But, and this is important, the litigation is evolving. So in September of 2024, a federal court in California allowed the case that California has against Exxon to proceed, finding that the plaintiffs had plausibly alleged that the company contributed to creating a public nuisance through what's called single-use plastic. So the court denied a motion to dismiss by Exxon, and that lawsuit is going forward. So some of the cases we're likely to see as microplastic litigation catches up with the PFA litigation are suits by individuals or classes who have been drinking water that's been impacted with microplastics, claims by property owners that their property values have decreased due to microplastic detection in the soil, lawsuits by local water districts looking to recover the cost of testing and the cost of getting this stuff out of the water system. We're going to see some broad public nuisance claims where there are people seeking the lost value of natural resources. And like I said earlier, the science is catching up. The testing methods are improving and the litigation is expanding. So if what happened with the PFA cases are any indication of where this is headed, we're just getting started. Now let's talk about the PFA litigation, which is much more mature and much more well established. The legal experts are comparing it to asbestos litigation in the terms of the scope, duration, and the cost. And believe me, the numbers are staggering. As of 2025, there had been over $12 billion in PFAS settlements, and this was to address contamination of public water systems throughout the U.S., right? There was a major settlement of $10.3 billion from 3M. This settlement will go to states like New York, New Hampshire, Florida, Washington, and New Jersey to address the PFA contamination in the water system. There was a $1.18 billion settlement funded by a company called Chemours and by DuPont and a company called Corteva to resolve some PFA contamination claims. There was a $450 million settlement in New Jersey. This was a settlement with 3M for statewide PFA contamination. A $750 million settlement against a Johnson Controls unit called Tyco Fire Products, and this was in Wisconsin. There's a $730 million settlement with a company called Kid Finwall. Right? And this goes on and on. Like BASF had a $316 million PFA settlement. There's a class action in Wisconsin for residents whose private drinking water wells were contaminated with PFAS, and that resulted in a multi-million dollar settlement. So the type of PFA cases fall into some different classes. So you have these multi-district classes. This is where a lot of maybe municipalities or states get together and they're bringing these claims. They are bringing claims for personal injury, where individuals are bringing claims for kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, things like that. We are seeing the state attorney general lawsuits. This is where states are bringing these claims for the contamination, for the damage to the natural resources. They are looking to recover cleanup costs. They're looking for medical monitoring costs and the damage to public health in general. We are seeing specifically the municipal and water utility cases where cities and towns are getting together and suing to cover the cost of installing treatment plants to remove PFAS or maybe switching to alternative water sources that may not be contaminated, right? They have to test for these PFAS and they have to try to remediate them. And believe me, the cost to clean up a single site can range from $5.3 million to up to $62 million. And that's just what has been documented in cleanup. So let's talk about who can file a claim for one of these things, right? And that's what everybody wants to know, who might have a valid legal claim. For microplastics litigation, you're going to have to show that you were exposed to products that contained PFAS. And this should be pretty easy to do because they are so prevalent in our society. Now, another one of the challenges is going to be showing the particular exposure. Because they are so prevalent in our society, how do you say your exposure came from this product compared to that product? And that's part of why we see these lawsuits against big manufacturers with the assumption that because they put so much plastic out there into the environment, they have to be a source of the contamination. Now you're going to see parents upset about exposure to their children through baby bottles that were falsely labeled. You're going to see people who've contracted diseases suing, if they've suffered a stroke or reproductive issues or inflammatory conditions, and it's shown that they have these microplastics in their blood, in their tissues that science says could have caused and contributed to these conditions. And look, I've got to be clear. The successful microplastics cases are consumer fraud cases, and these are cases where people are seeking cleanup. Municipalities are seeking cleanup, not so much for personal injury. But the personal injury litigation cases are developing, and they're starting to mirror what we saw in the PFAs. As I said earlier, the PFA cases are much more developed. We have seen settlements in those types of cases where people are relating their injuries to the PFAs. So, look, I know we've covered a lot and I've thrown a lot at you. What's important to know now is that if you feel you may have been exposed to microplastics, and you probably were, if you feel you were exposed to PFAs, and there's a good chance that you were, right, you should speak with an attorney who is, of course, familiar with that type of litigation. And this is not your neighbor's nephew who just graduated law school and does a little family law and some other stuff on the side. It's going to be a very experienced attorney, probably somebody who handles class action lawsuits, experience with handling asbestos claims, other large claims like that. Speak to somebody, find out what you need to do to document your exposure, and make sure you are protecting your rights. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Ask Rusty podcast. If you found this episode helpful, if you know someone that may like it, please make sure to share. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe and stay informed.